And that's one of the profound conclusions in James McCartney's book, From Crisis to Creation, when he interviewed everybody who had a crisis happen to them and they created a new life that better fit their soul, their soul's essence. He said, if you could go back and take away this wheelchair and walk again, but go back to your old lifestyle, would you do it? And they said, no. It took that for me to have the best relationship with my kids I've ever had.
Wow.
To have the best relationship. It's like an autocorrect. It is a realignment in a hurry because we have to advance. We have to show what can happen because we're all...
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. As always, so wonderful to be with you all again. And please remember, if you're liking the shows, to please subscribe, press that bell button, share the shows with your friends, and leave me a comment. I love hearing from you. Today, I have another extraordinary person to introduce you to. Some of you might have already seen his work, Jeff Granville. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you, Karen.
Also, one of our speakers for the Higher Self Expo. Jeff has an amazing story. You're going to love Jeff's wisdom and his story. Jeff's topic for the Higher Self Expo is harnessing our innate ability to achieve wellness, which we're going to talk about today. It's a subject I'm very passionate about because I've been, my journey started with the illness of my mother when I was a teenager, or even probably she was about 10 or 11 when she first got sick. And my questions were, why? Why do people get sick? And then she dies a few years later. I'm like, why? Where do you go when you die? So that was the beginning of the search for me. And Jeff and I were just discussing that spiritual awakening happens predominantly through these traumas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. I mean, it's like we were talking about it. It usually, when you get thrown a curveball in life, or you take a shot to the gut, it's that metaphor of like an unexpected crisis in your life. And I had mentioned the book, Jane McCartney's book, From Crisis to Creation, and it's all about how we handle the situation to move forward that makes creation or our demise. So
yeah,
once we've faced that, we're a different person. We go through that singularity, that go through that eye of the needle, and we're never the same again.
Right. I love the name of that book, From Crisis to Creation. It's so true. Let me read you a little bit about Jeff. I've there's so much I could say about. I don't know if I'll read all of it, but I was getting some information off his amazing website. But and I thought, oh, that sounds good. I might read all of it. Anyway, here goes. Jeff Granville faced every parent's worst nightmare. Little did he know that a calm inner mental practice of visualization and breathing, or what today is called mindfulness, would save a life. On December 30th, 2014, Jeff's 4-year-old son, McCoy, suddenly became very ill. During the medical procedures to save his life, Jeff used mindfulness to soothe and care for McCoy as he was going through things like spinal taps and other invasive procedures. After McCoy was diagnosed with a rare form of T-cell leukemia, Jeff became a mindfulness practitioner and formed a non-profit called Mindful Presence to bring the gifts of mindfulness, coherence, and controlled breathing to pediatrics, patients, families, and care providers. There are plenty of dark clouds. It's up to us to make the silver lining, Jeff says. For much of his life, Jeff was fascinated with the human connection between science and spirituality. Historically, science and spirituality has been seen as polar enemies, but now with the understanding of quantum physics, we become the connection where science and biology and spirituality merge. Without biology, science and spirituality cannot exist. They are the constructs of the human mind. Jeff is a fifth-generation inhabitant of San Juan Island, growing up around the waters of the Pacific Northwest. He's a father of 8, a grandfather of 6 beautiful children. And today, Jeff shares his story, and I hope it will resonate with all that are capable of receiving it. And your website is mindfulpresence.org. Mm-hmm. It says here, I'm going to read this stuff because I just love it. It says here on your website, over 100 years ago, Albert Einstein theorized that a photon was both a particle and a wave. Quantum physics has since proven with experiments such as the Joule split experiment and the Wheeler experiment that this is a fact. Now the teachings of Nasim Haraman show us that every proton is actually a subatomic black hole. Every atom in the universe fluctuates between a particle and a wave at the speed of light. When we pray, meditate, or become coherent, we rhythmically align this fluctuation. In these coherent states, we become more wave than particle. We spend more time connected to the source field energy, also known as God. Yeah. So
I love what you chose.
There's more I could read.
You put that together very well, and it really, that really leads in well, because one of the topics, the speaking topic is, as you quoted, but one of the things that I'm really working on and we're writing about, and it's going to be part of the Higher Life Expo, is we're biohacking the physiology of our divinity. We have the ability with our conscious mind to become so coherent in the moment that we're right brain dominant instead of left brain dominant, and we are divinity. And that is how we become the eye of the storm. That's how we become the calm. And that's how we slow that rhythm down of that fluctuation between particle and wave that you talked about, because it is not just it's not just a theory. It is something, as you read in the intro, is that science and spirituality exist in nature innately. It's only the humans that separate them. The terms wouldn't even be there if it wasn't for a human perception of both things. But in nature, they just exist innately. And when we realize that, and when we use those things, the awareness and the knowledge of that on a quantum level, and we become that low resonance, then we are truly in the moment where we are the eye of the storm. And there's literally math for the singularity of being in that moment. And it puts us in a position of receivership. And that's, I got there through the story with my son, but getting to that point of calm where you're open to divinity is the key to surviving and getting through that eye of the needle. So, and it works everywhere. Like I say, if we can make that work in the pediatric environment, then it works everywhere, in schools and in the home and at your job. It's because it's all core. It's coherence is a core innate ability that we all share, and our autonomic nervous system does not have a choice. It's automatic, so we can biohack it and it automatically works. So it's something we all share innately. So
yeah, I think it's the core of getting through life, Jeff. I don't think it's the core of getting through trauma. I think it's the core of getting through life. Yeah. And I don't know if it's right brain dominance. I think it's left right brain coherence. It's just, when I speak to a lot of people that are very connected to their galactic families, and they're up on ships and, they go there, and the ETs, like, it's only the human world where we've had this separation between the two lobes of our brain, and the ETs have just one. It's like it's all one. It's like it's unified. Right. But we've been given this opportunity to kind of be more dominant on one side. And have you ever seen Balti Taylor? What's her name? Oh, I've gone blank. Jill Balti Taylor's. Yeah, where she had a stroke and then she was
just going to reference. Yes.
Yeah, and she's completely right brain. She's completely right brain dominant. So she's out in the cosmos flying around and she's seeing colors and it's just all amazing, but she can't communicate with anyone. So that left brain part of us, that logical part of us, needs to translate what we're receiving right brain into some sort of way in which we communicate as humans, which is, you know, verbally. Yeah. But let's get into your story.
It is. Yeah, it is. I just want to comment, but it is integration of both sides. It's again, just like the universe, the false sense of duality. We see separatism and duality, but that's another human construct. The goal is to have balance and integration. So integration of both sides and balance. Yes.
You know what I find so interesting? 20 odd years ago, I saw Greg Braden talk. He came out to Australia and he's amazing. He's an amazing presenter. Have you ever seen him talk live or?
Yeah. Well, I did see him once live in the night. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And all I could think was, why do humans need so much proof to just feel loving? To just be relaxed and feel loving. Like, why do we need to go back into history and say, this is why, and then science, and this is why? And when I think of mindfulness and epigenetics and Nasim Haraman and, you know, Bruce Lipton and all those people, there's science behind mindfulness, and yet mindfulness is just the practice of being calm and creative visualization and feeling good. And yet we need all this science to sort of prove to us that this simple practice is life-changing, because it's almost like it's too simple, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the leading collegiate professor PhDs that teach mindfulness around the world, David Richardson, and Richard Davidson.
Okay.
I think I got that backwards, but he says mindfulness is a return to kindness.
Right.
And like you say, how simple can it get? I mean, just breathe and love.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Anyway, it perplexes me, but humans, we're stubborn. The older I get, the more stubborn I see we are. I was going to say to you before, I've got a client who is into all things, you know, consciousness and galactic, and she's on her spiritual journey and really delving into it. And her husband's not on board, right? But he says, you do your thing, honey, I'll do my thing, but don't talk to me about it. Anyway, so recently he broke his neck. And he's okay, he's getting better. And then he reveals to her that he actually had some sort of NDE during breaking his neck. And now he's in this place of confusion. And now he's asking questions. Whereas before it was like, I'm not interested. I'm not asking any questions. You do your thing. Don't talk to me about it. But now he's asking questions. And we were talking online the other day about it. And she said, why did it take breaking his neck to really sort of shake him up a bit? And I'm like, that's the human mind, right? It's like, what am I going to do to wake you up? Oh, okay, I'll just break your neck. Like, yeah. So
no, Karen, that really speaks to that quote that I forwarded you, because it is that misalignment. You know, when we are out of alignment with the essence of our soul, that creates the gap between our autonomic consciousness and our heart and soul and our conscious being. So once that gap is started, once trauma or incidents creates a gap, and we are doing something or something has been done to us that's against the nature of our spirit, which is peace, joy, and love, then that creates that crevice for all things to fall into. So it's getting separated from that. I think you have that quote, because this is the core of all disease.
Do you want to read that quote? It's such a beautiful quote. Do you want to read it?
Okay. I have it right here. Okay. At the core of every human being, there is a divine wisdom that knows who you really are, what your soul prefers. This deep knowing from the soul speaks through the heart to the gut, brain, and mind body. Allowing the ego or social environmental influences to lead you away from this divine wisdom is the root cause of all disease and manifests in the body as symptoms. Healing is the process of finding out who you really are and then living true to yourself.
Yeah.
So if you unwind that, if you are not living true to yourself, then you leave room for disease. Your soul is crying out through your heart, gut, and mind body to get your attention, and you're not paying attention because you're left brain dominant, stressed, and triggered. So that's the key, is getting back to who you truly are.
Yeah. And I have seen that over and over and over and over with many of the people I've had on the shows, that their spiritual awakening was through pain.
Yeah.
And once they did some self-inquiry into the pain, like doctors had given up on them. So they thought, you know, I'll meditate, I'll start meditating. Then their like guides start talking to them and they start channeling, and they completely have this 180-degree turnaround in their life. And then they go from soccer mom to like conscious, you know, channel, changing the lives of millions. And that's the pain is the wake-up call. And synchronistically, you sent me that in an email this morning, or my morning, your afternoon. And then I get an email from someone saying, I see you're also a healer. I know you can help me. I've been in pain for many years and the doctors don't know what to do. And I know you can help me. And I'm just thinking, there it is again, you know, there it is again. I haven't answered this email yet, but yeah, it's that wake-up call. Pain is a wake-up call. Yeah, it's asking you. It's talking to you.
That's that book I referenced by James McCartney, From Crisis to Creation. He was a rehabilitation specialist for labor and industries here in the United States, here in Washington State, actually. He was a neighbor of mine. Didn't know it, but anyway, he was in charge of getting people rehabbed after crisis, after injury, to get them back to work. And then he suffered a seizure and became a quadriplegic. And he had to come from that crisis, and he interviewed hundreds of people, thousands of cases, where the physical trauma that took place in people's life was exactly what they needed to get back to being true to their soul. They were living so disconnected from their soul's journey that the universe said, you need a fast forward, you need an incident in order to reshape you. And with me, it was my journey with my son, and I call it the peeling of my onion. You know, we all walk through life busy. I'm a coach, I'm a manager, I'm a business owner, I'm this, I'm that. This is my label. But the minute you take that hit and you get that diagnosis or whatever it is you're facing in your life, it's like immediately your onion is peeled. None of that matters anymore. You're just right there in the moment. So it's from that point, that eye of the needle, that singularity is a magic place. And there's tons of beautiful science about being the eye of the storm, so you can fit through the eye of a needle, the moment in time that determines your, and they call it in science called the cone of certainty. You know, you can re-aim your trajectory in life from that singularity, and getting through the eye of the needle, you're new again. It's like being reborn.
Yeah.
So
I know. Well, let's get into your story. I want people to hear, because your story is amazing with McCoy. What happened? Like, what was happening that day?
Well, my son McCoy, who is 11 now and fine and in the other room and you know, on his pad or something. We went sailing earlier, so they're on pad time now, but he's beautiful, he's healthy, and he's led me on this journey. But on December 29th, 2014, we went through the emergency room doors at Seattle Children's Hospital because my son was swollen in the face, and they thought he had a local virus back in Eastern Washington where we lived. And we came to the Seattle area to stay with my mom after Christmas, and he was sick. So he was what turned out to be lymphoblastic. He had so many lymph nodes that were tumorous that it was choking his airway. It was crushing his superior vein, so blood could go to his head but not return to his heart. So his face was swollen up, his eyes were actually swollen shut. And they had to do, they took a lab draw, and his white blood cell count was over 400,000. And they said, your son has leukemia or lymphoma. We don't know which. And of course, I did that bargaining debate with God of why not me? Take me instead. Do I even believe in a God that would allow this to happen, let alone be punishment to a 4-year-old? That's one of the major things to being coherent, is when you take a hit and you're no longer aligned and in tune to spirit, that takes you out of coherence. And we can talk more about that later. But I took that hit wondering and why, and then McCoy struggled for a breath. And immediately I fell to my knees and I realized I was given everything I needed to help him the most. And that was just to be there with him, be there in the moment. His eyes were swollen shut and he couldn't see. It's like the equivalent of an alien autopsy, for a 4-year-old to be in a hospital with people poking at you and doing things. And they needed to do a lumbar puncture. They needed to pull spinal fluid, but they couldn't sedate him. And they had seen me work with him, getting the lab draw and the IV placed and some oxygen. And they said, I think the only way we can help your son is if we can get you permission to go into the room, the surgical room, with him and try to talk him through it, try to talk him, keep him calm. So that's what I did. I had about an hour to get ready. And all I knew from, the few books I read and the breathing work that I had done just as kind of hobby and for fun, spiritual, exploration. But really nothing, hadn't delved into it really deeply. But what I knew is that if I could have him listen to my voice and I could guide him down the river we had floated and down the ski slopes that we had skied the last 2 years, that I could try to get him mind out of body. And that's exactly what happened. I found out later, I got him into a theta brainwave state where he's breathing, and about every 4th or 5th breath, he would snort a little bit, and he was kind of trying to go to sleep, and my voice would keep him out. And they were able to put a PICC line in to his heart, and they were able to do a lumbar puncture and get 3 vials of spinal fluid to test out of his spine without him batting an eye. And it was just this surreal, thick, slow moments that it was just surreal. And as we talked earlier, I was more waves than particles. So after they drew the spinal fluid and proved that there was no leukemic blasts in his spinal fluid, they could give him chemotherapy. And his swelling started to go down, and we were in the room at night. And I'm laying there, and the nurses had left the room, and I have him in one arm and my iPhone in my right hand, and I'm searching on YouTube for Eye of the Storm, Eye of the Storm. It just kept coming to me, Eye of the Storm. And I come across Nasim Haraman in Barcelona, giving a quantum physics lecture for 8 days. And what is he saying? He says, any meteorologist can tell you the velocity of the wind. I want to know the math of the eye. I want to know the math of singularity. And I was hooked. I started going down that path of what it meant to be so in the moment, so coherent in the moment, in the center of yourself in that singularity, and then open to divinity and what new possibilities can happen from that moment. And like in Hawaii, the practice of Ho'oponopono, they say the essence of your soul is peace, joy, and love. And anything other than that is a human situation that it's up to you to clear by saying, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And they say, if your cup is full of human windings, you have no room for divinity. So if you can clear to 0, then your cup is open to divine inspiration. So that is exactly what happened in that moment with my son, is that we were just such a coherent unit. And there's personal coherence, as heart math teaches, there's personal coherence. And then when 2 people get together, the coherence of a caregiver or loved one can entrain the other person into coherence as well. And then you become an emergent total greater than the sum of your parts. And from that is where we were the eye of the storm, passing through the eye of the needle, that singularity in time where you can then take control of your situation with divine inspiration and divine guidance, where if you were full of yourself and human windings and angry at the doctors and this and that, you would not have got through the eye of the needle. You would not have survived. So it is literally life-changing. And that's where, like I say, we're biohacking our physiology of our divinity. That is an actual transition in the body and spirit.
It's an incredible story, Jeff. It's an absolutely incredible story. And I love the words you're using, biohacking. I don't know if I actually know what that means, but I love it anyway. But you know what this story reminds me of? There's a movie that I watched that I hated actually, but there was a scene in the movie. It's that Mel Gibson movie. It's about crop circles and aliens, all things I love to think about.
Yeah.
And yet it's your typical Hollywood horror movie and the aliens are coming to eat you and get you and but anyway, there's a scene in the movie where he has a young son who's an asthmatic and they're in the basement and the son has an asthma attack because the aliens are coming to get them, right? And he does exactly what he just talks him out of it. He just does this creative visualization. He slows his breathing and he talks because he doesn't have his puffer, I think. And that was just the best scene in the whole movie, apart from the beginning when they show all the fabulous crop circles. But yeah, and so there was, some part of the movie that was beneficial, I suppose, apart from the horror of the aliens coming to get you. But that when you're in that panic and that fear, you can get out of it without reaching for a drug or reaching for, just breathing and visualizing and calming. And yeah, it's amazing how simple.
And that's a beautiful, beautiful example of that too, Karen. That's a beautiful example of that because like I say, coherence is contagious, right? It's a positive contagion. So my calm becomes your calm.
Right.
If a doctor or a nurse walks into a room anxious, if a caregiver, care provider walks in mad because of what happened at home and they have these human windings going, that's going to be felt by the whole room, the patient, the family, everybody. So part of what we do is we teach this coherence to care providers, nurses, and doctors, because doctors, Western medicine doctors, are the number one rising rate of suicide in the world because they do, like you said, they know all the medical stuff. They've been taught all the AMA tells them to learn, but this has been left out. Spirit has been left out, back from Descartes and the Catholic Church, right?
Yeah.
And they take care of the spirit, will take care of the body. They are separate. So that is part of the divide that humans did.
Yeah.
That created.
And what I find so amazing is that we are not educated as to what negative emotion does to us physiologically, but, in our life in general, like law of attraction, how like attract, we're not educated. And so many people, and I saw this with my daughter, she's changing now, if you want to take the right for them to be upset about something away, like when she would get really upset and I'd try and talk her out of it, she would defend her point of view. Don't try and make me feel better. I have the right to be really pissed off or panicked about this.
Right.
It's like, this is my right to feel bad. And yes, it's your right to feel bad. And this is where most of us live, right? So a doctor that's pissed off with another doctor doesn't want to be talked out of it. Don't talk me out of it, and doesn't understand how that energy they're carrying is affecting all their clients and patients and everything, because they've got the right to feel bad. We have the right to feel bad. And yet if we understand what that's doing, like in so many ways, then you take measures to change that as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And it's part of what I love learning through this is that when we, boy, there's so many ways to respond, but you're talking about, I have the right to feel the way I do. That is sympathetic nervous system, triggered in fight or flight, left brain dominant. finding something in the field view to match my ego's worldview to substantiate why I feel the way I do. Look, the world is bad. I told you so, right? That is left brain. And it's funny because the brain is said to burn about 20 watts, like as a real dull refrigerator light, 20 watts. But we literally, like Joe Bolte Taylor teaches us, we literally have two brains in our head connected by a small band of tissue called the corpus callosum that act as a connector, but also as a veil. Because the left brain, the logical mind, doesn't have access to the right brain's connection to divinity with perfect clarity. There's a veil. And like she said, when she had her stroke and her left side hemisphere shut down, the 20 watts that was being divided between the left and right hemisphere all went into her right hemisphere, and it expanded to the point where, how am I ever going to fit down in that little body, right? So this is what's happening. We have 20 watts of power, or conscious power, this bandwidth of conscious intent, and we can focus it on problem solving in the now, matter to matter, left brain, fight or flight, and be consumed by the feedback loop of being addicted to that blood chemistry of reaction to fight or flight. Or we can consciously choose, consciously biohack, by our breath and by our seat of witness, by our place of zero, our singularity. And we can take away the power of that left brain loop and give the power to the right brain in connection to divinity and become calm. And I have this beautiful, we're looking at the earth behind me, right? And we've all heard of the Schumann Resonance.
Yeah.
It's the resonance of the earth that if you put your feet in water or you put your feet in the soil, the negative ions, it dissipates. Okay, well, that's the negative charged earth. So if we are wound up in human windings, right? The thalamus inside our brain gets so agitated and overworked, it gives signals to the hippocampus to set up this loop of blood chemistry that just sits and eats this emotion and makes a frequency. And I call that our human frequency, the human resonance. It's a higher frequency with this conscious intent and human windings and agenda, but the Schumann resonance and the human resonance are far apart. So if we take our human resonance, our human windings, and calm them down to the Schumann resonance of the earth, then we can become coherent. And that's our connection to divinity. That's why we all feel so good when we're out in nature and we have that awe moment, that God moment. Awe is the vowel sound of God. So we all get into that place of awe. We tilt our head to the right, which is divinity. And we have that moment and we have a smile on our face that's biohacking our vagal nerve system into that, that good feeling, dopamine, endorphin, blood chemistry that we love. That's what Bruce Lipton calls heaven on earth, right? The honeymoon effect. So yes.
Yeah. Again, it's funny how humans need science in order to go out in nature and feel good. It's kind of crazy. But I think, you know what it is, Jeff? It's us unraveling social conditioning, which says, again, I've got some clients who are teachers, and was a principal. Now she's got a job that oversees various schools. And she's like, how do I untangle this very strong thought form that says, in order to achieve, you have to work really hard. So this is just pervasive through our world, absolutely pervasive. It's not relax and enjoy your life and you'll achieve all you want to achieve, whether it's health in your body or love in your life or whatever it is that you want. It's like, no, work really hard. If you work really hard, you'll get what you want. And so people go, okay, work really hard. No time for going out into nature. I've got to work hard. So we're untangling this, aren't we? We need the science behind it to untangle this conditioning. What do you think?
That's, again, such a beautiful point, because innately, indigenous people from all over the world didn't need science to tell them anything
Right.
about their belief system, right? They
Yeah.
charted the moon, they charted the sun, science and nature were one.
Right.
The only reason, like I say, I can't bring crystals and woohoo into the hospital. I have to go talk science to scientists. The reason that we need the science is because science is what took away our innate healing and our innate connection to wellness. So the reason, like we know innately, like when you're in the moment and you feel good, you're in right brain, you're just taking the download of the moment and you're in divinity. You don't need a bit of science, right?
Right.
But what you're having to combat in order to explain that to somebody or even explain it to yourself is all of the years of programming that's been jammed down our throats by the Western medical industrial complex,
Right.
that tells us we need these chemicals from outside our body to suppress our symptoms instead of going inside and innately healing ourselves from the root cause,
Right.
not chemically treating the symptom from the outside. Okay,
Right.
so the only reason I need science, and I love the science, I don't, like I tell people, I don't need science to tell me what I believe, but it sure is fun to research and find all this proof. And then when I work with people, it's usually the science that confirms what they innately believe. Because what we're having to combat to get people to their innate wellness is the programming of not being able to get well by yourself that we've been programmed to believe.
Absolutely.
So the science is what combats that and pushes that back so we can get back to our core innate ability. Yeah.
And aren't we blessed when the doctor gives you a diagnosis and says that your disease is incurable? Like, what a gift that is. Because everything is incurable. In order to find the cure, you have to go in.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so true. It's so true. Incurable, incurable. Like it's in the language. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
In the language. I have to say, I think I told you. I can't remember if I told you on camera or on the recording or not. But my journey started with Mum getting sick, and the question, what does it take? Why do you get sick? Why? And I had this question and I was seeking the answer to it and I found my answers. And when I discovered Petria King, and I've had them on the show, and what's his name? I'll find it in a minute, me and names. Anyway, there are these amazing teachers, spiritual teachers and healers here in Australia. And one had cancer and had his leg amputated, and Petria had cancer and she went and meditated in a cave. But basically it's a bit like Louise Hay's story. They cured their cancer through meditation. And I just realized that, oh, okay, I've got nothing to worry about because Mum dies of cancer and basically everyone in my family has died of cancer. No one's had a heart attack or an accident. They've all died of cancer. So I think to myself, right, well, if I get cancer, that's what I do. I go meditate. And that has been the go-to solution that I have had in my mind ever since I was in my 20s, because that was the answer to the cure, to all cure, is just to go within. And that came from these amazing teachers. I wish I could remember his name. It'll come back to me in a minute. And they teach this meditation is the way that they cured their disease. And so it seems like a simple solution to me that most people don't understand. And I have seen time after time after time, healers or spiritual people talk about this stuff, and when the shift hits the fan and they get sick or a diagnosis, they go straight to the medical model and they take the chemotherapy and they take the drugs, and kind of like all that common sense just flies out the window, because this medical industrial complex, as you call it, is such a strong thought form. It's such a powerful presence in our life.
And that is so true with physicians that are diagnosed within their industry. They either follow the medical industrial complex to the T, or they have nothing to do with it, because they've seen, they're so believing in it that they'll do it till death, or they will no, what I've been prescribing to people is not working. I'm not going to follow it myself. They won't practice what they prescribe.
Right. Because they've seen it not work. Right. I know there's doctors that have come out, and I dare not say it because I'll get banned on YouTube, that very popular remedy for, the big C word, and, oncologists that have been watching it for years say it doesn't work. 99% of people that have the remedy don't get cured from the disease. And if you do, it's a miracle. If you do, it's a miracle. I think if you do, it's because you've been practicing this mindfulness. Like maybe you've had the remedy, but you've also been practicing mindfulness, and you've changed your life. But they've come out to say, they pump it out ad nauseum. It's a multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry, and yet it doesn't work.
Right.
So
yeah,
go figure.
That's what keeps it going, is the lobbying and the propaganda network that they do. It's like Bruce Lipton pointed out. I saw him here in the Seattle area on Vashon Island a year or so ago, right before he gave me the endorsement. And he talks about that very thing, that if you took all of the wellness industry, the holistic medicine, the allopathic, everything, it's way bigger of an industry than the Western medical industrial complex. It's worth more per year than the entire Western medicine and pharmacy and everything, but they just lobby so well. And they know, it's like holistic, we know what works, and you really don't have to charge a lot of money for it, right? Mm. They know what they're using doesn't work, and they charge a lot of money for it.
Right.
And they spend a lot of time lobbying and advertising to nauseam in order to get us to think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
So it's daunting. But if we organized better and lobbied better, things could change. And that's part of my, and it's funny because I've made amazing connections with people like the mentors and the books I've read. If you look at the culmination of all their careers, whether it's Deepak Chopra, Dan Siegel, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Bruce Cryer from HeartMath, the culmination of all their careers is to bring this information into Western civilization, Western medicine. And that's where we're trying to get together and say, listen, we are coming to the Western, the hospitals in the Trojan horse of stress relief, because nobody can argue stress relief.
Yeah.
And if mindfulness and coherence can bring stress relief down, stress around procedures, operations, better outcomes, things like that, then we can bring it all through the back door of the Trojan horse.
Right.
We can all work together on it, and we're coming in under the guise of stress relief, which we do.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's Wayne Dyer, everybody's culmination to their career would be to bring this mainstream America, and from there out to change the system. So I'm learning from them. They've taught me it's my goal is to have this story somehow help shift that paradigm. So I'll be doing it the rest of my life. That's for sure.
Yeah, you have the same mission, vision, and passion as Scarlett Lewis, who I was telling you about, who's been on the show, and one of the authors in Awakened by Death, the book that I put out. It took the death of her 5-year-old to bring mindfulness practice into schools. You'll make me cry every time you do that. But what does it take to shift a system that's rooted in business, finance, commerce? People make too much money, and people that create peace need to be as organized as the people that create war. And it's, as I'm listening to you, I feel that same, people that are creating peace, in healing or healing need to be as organized as people that are, in that. It's not like, well, actually it is war, because the medical model is at war with disease. It's at war with it. And it is a war. It is a war of type. Instead of saying thank you to your pain for showing me there's something that I need to change in my life, we've got to fight this. And you hear it again. It's like, we've got to work hard. I've got to fight this disease. Something that I learned a long time ago through someone who said he had a friend who was a healer who'd been a healer all her life. And then when she was diagnosed with cancer, she went from being a peacemaker to a fighter because she was fighting the disease. And she very quickly lost the fight and died. But he just recognized that that fight, the disease, was not where it was at. It's like loving it. Yeah.
It is, and that's a brilliant analogy of it too. Because, and when I talk to people, I say, now what we do is we march for peace. We don't protest war. We march for peace. We want to put our energy into the paradigm we want to create. Like Buckminster Fuller said, you don't change a paradigm by fighting it. You create a new one to make the old paradigm obsolete.
Yeah.
Right? So we want to show the effect, the results-based difference between what we do and the medical model, the standard model. And I've always hoped, through this platform with Mindful Presence, that, like I say, we can stand here and pull kids out of the river all day long, but at some point we need to go upriver and see who's throwing them in, right? Because
that's such a great analogy.
You have to stop the conveyor belt. That's
we got to go upriver and see who's thrown them in. That's a great analogy. I want you to talk about your experience. I was listening to you on Louisa Tanner Munson's show, because she also had you on the show as one of the speakers for the Higher Self Expo, and I loved that conversation you had with Louisa. Isn't she beautiful? I'm about to release the show I've done with her and her story. I just love her. She's just so beautiful.
Yeah. And Carl are amazing people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't met Carl. I've heard a lot about Carl, but I haven't met him yet. But I'm so dying to go over to Portugal and hang out with them. I just love them. But what was your story? I love the quote that you sent me about what Bruce Lipton said to you. But do you want to share that story with our audience?
Yeah. Bruce Lipton, as everybody better know, is an amazing human being. He's an amazing spirit, and his nickname in his group is the Mountain of Love, because he is that. He's just walking love. And I had the opportunity to see him speak at the Science and Spirituality Conference in Nanaimo 4 years ago now, and Joe Dispenza, Cryon, Greg Braden, the whole Lynn McTaggart, great group. And I got to meet him. I got to give him a card. I got to tell him a little bit about the story, and I had communication with him. But then he came to the Seattle area, and he was putting on a benefit. He did this entire conference, no cost, for the Sunrise Dancers, the indigenous group that does amazing work up here in this area. So he was on Vashon Island, and I went over there, and I was talking to him on the side and trying to, get his attention, and he had people glamoring all over him. And I went over to get some food. I got a pass to go in the VIP area, and I was standing there getting some food. And one of the beautiful ladies there from the Sunrise Dancers, she's helping host and put it on. And I told her my story and why I'm there. And she says, well, if you want to talk to Bruce, you need to talk to that lady right there. And I looked over, and there's this Margaret Lipton, Bruce's wife. I had no idea who she was or what she looked like or anything. And we just started talking, and she was just taken. She was, kissing me on the cheek and tears in her eyes and hugs and, talking about McCoy's story. And Bruce was in a line. He was at a table signing books and doing with a big line of people that are waiting in the VIP section to get a minute of his time. And I'm telling Margaret the story, and I'm like, and the final thing my son McCoy did is he went through an 8-hour kidney transplant without an epidural and 0 pain meds, just by controlled breathing. And she's like, what? She walked straight over to Bruce, grabbed him by the arm, drug him out of the line, and said, you need to talk to this person. And we ended up having a beautiful conversation. And I asked him for his endorsement. And he introduced me to Annie, his manager, and we talked about, doing something together in the next year or so or whatever. And I was just so excited. I literally tears, just mentor. It meant so much to have him legitimize what we were doing. And so then afterwards, I get an email a couple days later from Annie that says, we looked at our schedule, and Bruce is just swamped for a year and a half. There's really no time for him to even review, let alone do a joint project. And I just was sunk. And it was like, okay, the power's in the pause. Let's practice what we preach. Take a breath. And I just said, I understand completely, and I'd appreciate your time. And just let Bruce know that an hour of his time could affect thousands of lives in the future. And I know I laid that on a little heavy, but she just said, well, let me see what I can do. And then a week later, she says, I have an amazing surprise. On the flight from Seattle to California, Bruce read all your research, read your website, and gave you this beautiful endorsement. So that has led to a number of other meetings and endorsements, like from Bruce Cryer of Heart Math and whatnot. So it was just a beautiful, beautiful time.
And I'm going to read the endorsement. As a pioneer in the field of epigenetics, I applaud and honor the profoundly important contribution Jeff Granville has provided in enhancing pediatric care in specific and medicine in general. Mindful presence is a valuable resource that can engage self-healing and the opportunity to reclaim sovereignty over our health and our lives. Bruce H. Lipton, stem cell biologist and pioneer in the field of epigenetics. Yeah, so yes. Yes. Can't be enough of it, Jeff. Listening, there can't be enough of it. Listening to you talk about how busy Bruce is, when we were thinking about speakers for the Higher Self Expo, we threw around people like Bruce Lipton and Dispenza and all those sort of people, but they're just rock stars in this field, and you have to book them a year or two in advance to get them to speak at anything. And Nasim Haraman, I love Nasim Haraman. I have to say, I don't understand most of what he says, but I absolutely love him. But that just tells me that there is this huge interest in what they've got to say, which is very encouraging, right?
Yeah. And the following, like the Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden, the following that these people have are in the millions, and they pay thousands of dollars for retreats and workshops and buy books by the millions. And, it's just an amazing following. And like you say, that is just the indicator of how popular and how needed this message truly is, and how timely it is, and what they're doing. And when you look at in the last year alone, since COVID, you look at the amount of work that those individuals have pumped out. They have a machine going of staff and help. And, you look at the internet television channel, TV channel, Gaia, and Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, and Nasim Haraman all had brand new series come out on Gaia that are outstanding. They should all be. I mean, I hate to even say it, but especially Joe Dispenza's Rewired should be assigned learning for every child in the world.
Oh, absolutely. On my quest for understanding, I embarked on a 5-year full-time naturopathy course. I didn't feel like I had anything that was going to change the world, but I felt like every kid needs to understand the way the body works. Like, we need to be taught this more in schools. And likewise with your health practitioners, they're getting taught the basics of physiology and anatomy, but they're not getting taught about how the mind works.
Dan Siegel, in his amazing book Mindsight, and he started the Mindsight Institute, and he literally teaches PhDs. So he'll have seminars with hundreds of PhDs in the audience, and he has a running survey going by a show of hands. How many of you in the audience have ever had a class about the mind?
Right.
Not the brain, but the mind. And 1 or 2 out of thousands say, well, in my freshman year, there was a psychology unit that talked about the mind and consciousness, but that's it.
Right.
So it is literally bisected out of the medical education system on purpose. It is that separation from Descartes and the Catholic Church on. that still stands.
Yeah. Well, that's changing, isn't it? And you're one of the ones that are
Yeah,
changing that.
we are changing that right now.
Changing the world. Funny you said you couldn't take crystals when you said you couldn't take crystals into the hospital system 30 years ago when I'm giving birth to my daughter. I didn't think I was in my late 20s. I didn't think I was ready to do a home birth. I didn't think I had that sort of mindful education enough to do what your son did, breathe through an operation. And I didn't think I had that too. So I went into the hospital system thinking if I need the drugs, I've got them available. And I had crystals and everything. Crystals. She was born preemie, and I had the crystals on top of the humidity crib, and I had my homeopathic doctor come in, and I had who else? I had somebody else in there. Oh, an acupuncturist come in. It was hilarious. I still had the drugs, but there was a long story about that because I actually stopped feeling the pain before they administered the drugs because I believed he'd given it to me. And I had all the pain went from screaming and abusing people like to no pain, and I thought I'd had the drugs, but he hadn't put the injection in yet. And so I had this thing happen to me where I'm like, what just happened? And my guide said to me, because you believed it, you experienced what you thought you were. And I'm like, wow, are we that powerful? And it's like, yeah. So yeah, that was amazing. But it was just funny hearing you. I can't take the crystals into the hospital, and I'm thinking, I did.
Well, yeah, you did, and so do I. I said I can't and try to convince them, but doesn't mean I didn't take crystals in the hospital, right? Yeah, we bring it all in through the back end of that Trojan horse. But yeah, and it's funny, because my daughter, one of my daughters, I have 5 daughters. One of my daughters is a master's in women's health and a midwife, and she was born by a midwife, and knew it her whole life what she wanted to be, and of course, we all know about Lamaze breathing and how innately women have been handling the most unbelievable pain and the most amazing feat of humans that ever could exist is to create a human and pass it into the world.
Absolutely.
That is the most divine things human does. And women have been doing it for millennia without drugs, without epidural, without and yes, there was high death, but the Western medical industrial system, the United States is 26th in the world for surviving childbirth. So all that money we spend in the Western medical industrial complex, we're still 26th. 25 nations survive childbirth better than the United States, and we spend more money on medical than all the 25 put together.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that.
The problem is, and my daughter, who's the midwife, when she was going to school, she did a module on this, and she goes, Dad, guess what we're working on this week? And she was telling me the story. And the number is that in America, inner city Black women are afraid in their environment. And their adrenal has put out such a high cortisol level for survival that they don't have the reserve to survive childbirth.
Wow.
So just by stress alone, chronic stress causes them to use their reserve of cortisol just to survive their environment, and they can't survive childbirth. So if you took that demographic out, we would still only be 5th in the world, 4 countries better than us. But that's an amazing, it's all on mindset and all what we provide for the environment of the women of our world.
Yeah.
So that shows you how stressful of an environment that inner city Black women are living in.
Wow.
Because they're not surviving childbirth.
I didn't know that. That's crazy. I remember before I got pregnant, my husband decided to go on a trip overseas, and when they opened up the Eastern Bloc countries, because he came from, his family was Czechoslovakian, so they all chuffed off to Slovenia or Czechoslovakia in those days because they could enter. Anyway, I went and did a meditation. I did the Vipassana 10-day meditation course, and I remember seeing a pregnant woman there, And I remember having that thought, oh, that's a really good thing to do when you're pregnant, do the 10-day meditation. I'm going to do that when I get pregnant. And I didn't.
You didn't.
I didn't. That's why I went to the hospital. I'm like, just in case I need the drugs. But what I did experience in my prenatal class was a video they showed us, which was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I didn't understand at the time how amazing it was, but it was of a woman giving birth outside of a hospital system, lying on a table in a completely calm state, in meditation, lying down, and her body was birthing. There was no effort on her part. There was no intervention. There was no one touching her or holding her saying, push, push. She was just left to herself, and this ripples of the body contracting and pushing out this baby. And at the point where the baby was coming, obviously there was, people to catch it on the other end. But it was amazing that the body just birthed and she was in no pain and no stress. And I didn't know that at the time because I was young and naive. I was watching it going, wow, knowing there's no way I could do that. But it was an amazing thing to see that is what's available when you just let it. Like when you get out of the way, the body knows what to do. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So,
I never heard that, but that is a perfect example of what our innate abilities are and how separated we are from them, because I've never heard of that. That was new to you when you saw it.
Yeah.
But that is what we're capable of.
That's what we're capable of. Yeah.
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 We're just not allowed.
We're capable.
Separated.
We're God, right? We're capable of amazing things. We're creation. We're creative genius. We're capable of amazing things if we just untangle the social conditioning and remember who we are. With your son, I wanted to ask you a few questions about your family. So you're a grandfather, and you've still got young children. You've been having kids for a while.
Yes, I have. Yes, there's a spread. I had 6 kids early on, and then I was a single parent for a long time. And my youngest daughter at the time I met my next wife of these two, she was 12 at the time we met and 16 when we had our first child. So there's a 16-year gap between my older 6 and my younger 2. And I've been a single parent most of that time in the middle. So yeah, it started early for me. I'm a high school graduate. I've worked in the boatyard industry my whole life, around boats in the marine industry, and had nothing to do with the medical industrial complex. This has literally drugged me into my new calling from that. But yeah, the experiences I've had with my kids and it is just so amazing when you finally, if you unwind that quote and I'm really living true to who I am, it's just amazing to see the path it took to get me here.
Yeah. And McCoy, there was no mistakes. And McCoy is your youngest.
Yes.
But isn't it interesting, after how many kids have you got? Did you say 8 kids? You got 8 kids?
8 kids.
And McCoy, being the youngest, was the one that opened up, that opened it all up for you. I just, wow.
Yeah, it's beyond wild. I mean, it's we found out that their mom couldn't conceive kids. Okay. So we medically induced 3 times to have McCoy's older sister Logan. But then once she walked through that door,
he came naturally.
True, right, without any help.
Wow.
And we've read into that before, and it was intention. It was supposed to be. I mean, that's part of, really soul searching, when you ask why. And then if you continue to walk your walk, you'll get those answers of why. Because I asked God, why him? Why not me? And, why is he going to have kidney failure? Why can't we heal his kidneys? And then we find out that the kidney transplant was like his big teaching of how you can get through a surgery without any complications and get out of the hospital in record time with 0 pain meds, no opiates at all, and 0 pain meds.
Okay, so we didn't really go into the story. So he had the acute sort of reaction when he had leukemia, and they couldn't give him any meds, and so you did the mindfulness, And then they managed to do a spinal tap and diagnose him, and then they gave him the allopathic treatment. And then after that, his kidneys failed. How long after that?
Well, when they first gave him chemotherapy, it slowed things down and reduced the swelling, but they didn't get the markers down as far as they wanted to. So instead of being on a long 3 or 4 year regimen of tough chemotherapy, they moved him straight towards a bone marrow transplant.
Right.
And then while he went through the bone marrow transplant and just did amazing. I mean, we have got some videos on our website, on the YouTube channel, of things that he went through and learned to get to that 0 point of bone marrow, radiation and chemotherapy and everything. And then he was coming out from day 0 of the bone marrow transplant, and he was doing so well with such amazing results. They said, okay, it's day 25 and you're going to get out on day 28. So we're going to give you a medicine to prevent a disease called graft versus host disease, GVHD, to where when you receive a bone marrow transplant, the bone marrow tries to reject the body. Mm-hmm. So the graft is versus against the host. Of course, they're setting up a combat, right? Versus the medical, industrial complex. Mm-hmm. They set up a battle. Okay, so the new cells are kicking out, fighting your old cells. So they give you this drug called tacrolimus. And he had a 1 in 10 million negative side effect from this tacrolimus that caused another epiphenomenon, different and more deadly than the leukemia was to begin with. And it's called TMA, thrombotic microangiopathy. Mm-hmm. And what it is the tacrolimus reprogrammed his T cells to kill every red blood cell in his body.
Oh my God.
So the carcasses of those red blood cells plugged his kidney filters, and he went into renal failure, and he was on dialysis for 27 months, over almost 500 dialysis runs, 4 hours each. And then he qualified for a transplant after 27 months of dialysis. So then he had to have his left kidney removed, and then a month later have his right kidney removed and his mom's kidney put in place.
Oh, wow. Whew, what a journey.
Yeah. So it was from the original lumbar puncture to the kidney transplant. There was a dozen more, life-changing. Like the doctor said, he's participating in his own survival. He is doing more. Like they say it's 50% what we do and 50% the energy of the room. How we receive the medicine and get it to pass through our body is the most critical thing, because people don't usually die from the disease. They die from the side effects of the treatment.
Right. Right. I've seen it many times.
Receivership, creating a state of receivership. When we're triggered in fight or flight, our core cells are closed. So we have blood in our arms and legs to run or fight or put out fire. So it takes 4 times the medicine to penetrate those closed off cells. So kids overdose. Like my son had an adverse reaction to a medicine because they gave him 4 times the needed dose, assuming he was afraid, but he was coherent.
He wasn't afraid.
It was an overdose for him. That's why he had that.
Wow.
So one of the things that we're doing, we're working with Seattle Children's in the clinical efficiency department. They run the first opiate-free surgical clinic in the United States, and I'm consulting with them right now because they've proven the less anxiety before anesthesia, the better the surgery and the quicker release with better outcomes. If you load up anxiety ahead, then you have complications during surgery and pain and complications after you wake up. So we're proving that by getting into this 0 point, the state of coherence, and being open and receptive, that you can give less medicine and less anesthesia and have less side effects from it. So one of the things we're calling for is cortisol levels checked. So we can check a person's coherence with heart math technology. We can check the biofeedback of the person's state of coherence and make a mark in their cortisol level of their blood. So they're doing lab draws all the time, so they can do custom dosing for children and all of us, but for children, so that they aren't overdosing them trying to force medicine into closed off cells. So if we can get a state of coherence, a state of open receivership, then it takes less medicine to do the job, and it passes through us cleaner without side effects, damaging our body. So that's
Yeah.
one of the things that we're pushing for to change.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like amazing work, Jeff, but you know what? It still sounds like you're fishing kids out of the river.
It is.
Yeah.
But without this platform, they'll never let us go upriver
And stop it at the source. Yeah, I know. You got to start somewhere, right?
Well, again, going upriver and finding out who's throwing kids in would be protesting war.
Yeah.
We would be going up there. You did it. We're going to sue you. You need to change your system. You're putting all your effort towards fighting the paradigm. So literally downriver, if we're pulling kids out and showing different results, we're going to create a new paradigm that makes the old one obsolete. It'll come crumbling down. So we don't have to really go upriver. We can just do it from here.
So this is a model that, you know, people need to listen to, because this has been so huge in our current, you know, healing crisis that the world's going through. Because there are just a lot of people out there that want to go upriver and be at war with the people throwing, you know, and that it's not working. Nope. And it's not working because the people that have the bigger industries are just trying to silence those people, and we're seeing that en masse, and so that's not working.
Right.
Yeah, we just have to. We can't fight war with war. You just can't. No. Yeah, just
love.
Love.
Yeah. Love.
Right. Yeah.
Martin Luther King knew it. They all knew it. All of our teachers, all of our learned masters, 99% of all religion says the same thing, but they're willing to fight over and kill each other over the 1% they disagree on. And that's the human part of stand up, sit down, how do I worship?
Yeah.
But love and compassion and kindness and acceptance and inclusion are you know, that's divinity in us. That's the Absolutely. Divinity in us. If Absolutely. We can calm ourselves to zero and shut down our windings and our agenda, then we can receive people as we are. Mm-hmm. Right? We receive people, we see people as we are. So if we're coherent and we're connected to divinity, that's what we'll see in other people. That's what I see with everybody I interact with.
Yeah, exactly. And while you're fighting the people that you think are doing the wrong thing, you're not in your own divinity. Yeah, you're not in your own coherence. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, my daughter had because I've been teaching this stuff for years and she knows it. And just like I was telling you, she's like, I have the right to feel this way. Don't try and make me feel better. Was her stand most of the time, until life gets to the point where that feeling, you just don't want that feeling anymore. And now you're looking for other alternatives. But it took a blessed shark to really teach her that. So she's off sailing the ocean blue. She makes documentaries out on the ocean. She was just under a year ago, she was bitten by a shark, and he didn't really bite her. He just had a bit of a taste, because if you're bitten by a shark, you usually have a limb removed. But she just had this massive gash in the bottom of her leg. And when she was in hospital, she didn't want to take the drugs because the drugs didn't make her feel good. She had a few operations. And so she was practicing mindfulness to cope with the pain. And it was a huge lesson for her. Lesson for her. And she's been quite transformed since that shark bite in so many ways. So I just bless that, bless that shark. What's it going to take? It won't listen to mum, but it'll take a shark. It'll take a shark to like hammer the message home. Yeah.
Right. You know, and that's one of the profound conclusions in James McCartney's book, From Crisis to Creation, when he interviewed everybody who had a crisis happen to them and they created a new life that better fit their soul's essence. He said, if you could go back and take away this wheelchair and walk again, but go back to your old lifestyle, would you do it? And they said, no. It took that for me to have the best relationship with my kids I've ever had. Wow. To have the best relationship. It's like an autocorrect. It is a realignment in a hurry because we have to advance. We have to show what can happen, because we're all in a high state of vibration right now. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of the 80% in the middle. You know, it's like Bruce Lipton's caterpillar analogy, right?
Right.
90% of the caterpillar cells are freaking out, while us 10% have a blueprint for flight.
Right. Yeah.
And it's even more than that, because there's 10% on the other end that are devouring their environment like the caterpillar, eating every leaf in sight, just looking like we're destroying the world. But yet we're just providing the biomass to create a new paradigm. We're becoming, it's the COVID cocoon we're shaking and becoming, you know, spreading our new butterfly wings of who we are. So it's like forcing that issue. And for some people, it's not handled. We don't spiral up, we spiral down.
Right.
You know, if you are changing the energy of the system by knowledge, if you change knowledge and change awareness, then you change the entire system.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm going to really go into in the Higher Life Expo.
I love that you call it the Higher Life. It's a great name. It's not the name of it, but it's a great name. The Higher Self, Higher Life, Higher Self, Higher Life. It's a good name. Yeah, I like the Higher Life Expo, but the Higher Self.
Well, I'm having a higher life. I'm, you know, like Wim Hof says, you get higher in your own supply, right? It's all here.
Oh, Jeff, well, I look forward to listening to your talk at the Higher Self Expo, and you're doing amazing work. Thank you so much for all the work. And thanks to McCoy. He's 11 now and he's healthy. He's got new kidneys. I suppose he still has to take anti-rejection drugs. Is he still on?
Yes. Day and night for the rest of his life. And he has to drink 3 liters of water every single day. And he hasn't missed a drop. He's just, he leads the way. He's the master of his world. He's
a little master in physical
11
form.
going on 911. Yes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
I know. I was spreading his on your YouTube channel. You've got some little clips of him doing some quotes, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so cute. And I was just spreading them all over Facebook last night.
Oh, how sweet. Thank you.
So thank you so much to you and your beautiful family, and thanks for being on this show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for your service and your offering to bring this forward. Thank you so much. Good to meet you.
What an incredible conversation with Jeff Granville. I knew when I was watching him on Louisa's show last night when I was researching him that I'm like, oh, wow, he's one of the people that are going to transform the medical model. Yeah, he's doing it. It's not easy. Gee, it's not easy, but he's out there doing it. What does it take to transform our world? It's going to take big stories, big stories of overcoming to really make people sit up and listen, isn't it? Anyway, that's what it's going to take. So that's what's happening. But his son's story is just incredible. That little boy has been through so much. And yet if you go to Jeff's YouTube channel, it appears that McCoy just is not really suffering through it. He's like this little master here on earth that is a part of the shift in human consciousness that has taken on that role to go through what he's going through. It's incredible, really, isn't it? It's incredible. And what I found fascinating too, that it was after 7 kids that McCoy enters this world and does this. It's an amazing place we live in. There are so many master teachers that come in as children who are sick to teach us compassion and unity and mindfulness. And yeah, sometimes illness can be an incredible teacher, especially when we see it in the young and innocent. What does it take to change our minds? So the message, I suppose, that all my shows, but particularly this one, would have is don't be too fixed in your ideas about anything. Jeff and I were talking about the current allopathic solution to the current health crisis. Even though I'm not up for it, I'm not that fixed. If they make me have it, then they make me have it. And he was saying, you know, if you make that decision and line up with it, my words. And I'm like, yep, thank you, Jeff, for the reminder. Yep. I do teach this stuff, so I'd have to practice what I teach. If I do something that I don't want to do, I have to bring myself around to a place of wanting to do it and being in alignment with it and being grateful for it instead of in resistance. even though it's diametrically opposed to all of that, I believe. But that's the human world as we stand at the moment in history, isn't it? Sometimes we have to do what we don't want to do because people are forcing us to do it, but we can still change things, not with the fight. We can change things with our love, and know that the body has an amazing ability to detoxify itself if we allow it, even when we're getting allopathic solutions that are not really in alignment with health, which most of them aren't, I have to say. Yes, I hope you enjoyed that. I think Jeff's amazing. I'm very impressed with Jeff. Amazing. He has that same passion and commitment that Scarlett Lewis does. If you haven't seen the show I did with Scarlett Lewis, she's one of the authors in Awakened by Death. Go and check out my show with Scarlett. She's changing the world. She's amazing. I want to connect those two because I just so think that maybe they can work together. So Scarlett's working in the school systems and he's working in the medical system. So it's two different systems, but they're kind of bringing the same message, really. Working inside the system. Yeah, working inside the system. What are you doing? I'd love to hear from you. How can you be inside a system and change it from the inside out without pushing against it, without being at war with it? Yeah, love is the answer, no matter where you are or what you do. Love is the answer to transforming this world. It's only love. It'll take love. That's what it'll take. It's not going to take pushing against the narrative or being upset about it. That all that does is make you sick. And then when you're sick, you're no help to anyone. So your wellness and your well-being is your message to this world, regardless of what's happening. These are extraordinary times we're living in, aren't they? Extraordinary times. Transformative times, potent times. And we're so very blessed to be here at this time on earth. I feel that. I hope you do too. The challenges, even though it's challenging, the challenges are what makes life so appealing. Human life, physical life, 3D life, so appealing to all that come here. They go, yep, I'm up for that challenge. Yep, get me down there. I want some of that. When you get here, you're like, what was I thinking? But if we can stay in that gratitude and in that knowing that no matter what challenge we face, we have the power and the ability to sail through it in loving presence, with ease and grace, in love and light. You know, we talk about this in the conscious community all the time. Love and light, love and light, love and light, love and light. It is the answer to everything. It is the answer to everything. To find the cure, we have to go within, the cure to everything. Meditation, mindfulness, speaking to your mob. You know, mindfulness or meditation got me connected. Well, not that I wasn't connected, I just didn't realize I was connected, but that conversation, I can just connect so easily and just chat to them like there's a person standing in the room. It's just so beautiful. And that was all through mindfulness and meditation. I'd spent many years meditating, many years meditating, to the point where I can just sit and fall into that complete bliss and stillness, and just in an instant. It's beautiful. It should be in every school, everywhere. It should be taught in every industry. Anyway, it will one day. It will. Okay, I'm going to go. And my show with Louisa Tanner Munson's about to come out, but it'll come out before this show, so I don't even know why. But she's delightful, just delightful. Hope you enjoyed listening to her story as well. And Sue Walker's coming up into the Inner Sanctum. And of course, what I'm teaching in the Inner Sanctum is all that we spoke about today with Jeff, is getting in touch with your power and your ability to transform yourself and this world. That we are genius creators, and our genius lies in our ability to feel at peace, relaxed, and to tap in, turn on, tune in to that our higher presence, our soul's perspective, or our higher self's perspective. And that higher perspective is where all the answers are. But in order to access it, you have to be in a really peaceful, relaxed, joyful place. joy and excitement is still a relaxed place, even though excitement can feel like it's not relaxed. It's much more relaxed than stress. Yeah. All right. Big love to all of you, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.